The new hardware of next-gen consoles and high-end PCs paved way for the new monster designs and behavior within Monster Hunter World. Before a monster is even visually designed, the team decides what type of fight the creature would put up, whether they fly, spit poison, or breathe fire. Then from there, working alongside environment designers, the team began to build a visual aspect of the monster. This method was used during production to make a more believable feel to the monsters. Monster Hunter World is the 5th installment in the Monster Hunter mainline series, but isn't called Monster Hunter 5. Series producer Ryozo Sugimoto stated in an interview with VG247, "I think when you get a series that runs for quite a few years, the numbers start to get bigger and bigger, and it starts to become increasingly off-putting for somebody who isn't into the series already. They may think, am I going to try Monster Hunter 5 when I haven't played the first 4? What if I don't get it?" The title Monster Hunter World was chosen to express the way the living ecosystem functions within the game. Basically, the developers worked on creating a seamless world that appeared to function even without the player by removing loading zones and creating a more dynamic interactions between creatures, monsters, and players alike. PC version of Monster Hunter World was released later than the PS4 and Xbox One versions because the Monster Hunter team had never really internally developed a game for PC before, so more time was requested for the Steam release of the game. The PC port of the game wasn't even started until after the console version was finished. Monster Hunter World developers avoided adding loot boxes due to it potentially interfering with the challenge reward system the game's known for, as well as potentially causing friction between players. Sugimoto stated in an interview with US Gamer, "We want to make sure nobody's under the impression that because it looks like the kind of game where you might have loot boxes, they definitely aren't in there. We want people to just enjoy our great gameplay loop of achievement satisfaction, where there are tough challenges, but learning how to play the game and getting better at it, you'll be able to overcome those challenges." The Legiana, and more specifically its wings, are actually based on an airplane. Director Kanami Fujioka explains, "There are many different parts of an airplane's wing, parts that can move up and down to increase or decrease speed. If you look at Legiana's wings, you'll see that it's not just one solid wing, but it's actually several different wings, which allow it to do things like speed up, slow down, and dive bomb, all strong inspirations that came from thinking about airplanes." The Nergigante has over 1,000 horns around its body that can each be individually lost or regenerated during a fight. It is thanks to new hardware of high-end consoles and PCs that these type of enemies can exist within Monster Hunter World, as each thorn exists independently on Nergi's body. Monsters are designed before the gear you receive from them is. Something developers take into consideration is how the parts of the monster you defeated and carved would work as armor and weapons. The first gameplay demo was first completed in November of 2015 and showcased during the GDC Monster Hunter panel in 2018. It showcased many of the same gameplay features present in the final product, like scout flies, mounting, and the tracking system, but also demoed the use of darkness in certain areas that went unused ultimately. The original use for Bright Moss was to help players explore these dark areas by providing a fireable source of light. Though the demo video played at GDC showcased the Lagiacrus, the final game did not have the electric water monster present. What developers learned from the demo is that the Lagiacrus' large and long body would have been too costly to produce correctly, and decided it would have been best to leave the monster out of the final product, as well as any future DLC. The GDC video also showcased the monster Anjanath, a new addition in Monster Hunter World. Presumably from this footage, the Anjanath was the first designed monster for Monster Hunter World. Gajalaka are tribes of small humanoid creatures that are hostile towards hunters and monsters, often attacking them when aggravated. The colors of their masks actually correspond with the ailment they inflict. Blue is sleep, yellow is paralysis, and purple is poison. One of the major changes in Monster Hunter World is to focus on online play, and how the distinction between offline and online play is non-existent in this installment, whereas in other games the player would have to create a lobby for specific quests. Fujioka has stated, "In the past, something as simple as internet connectivity wasn't something you could really rely on for the player base at large. Now it's kind of the default to assume that everyone can connect online. So now that's our basis for creating this online game. We've introduced things like voice chat and other methods of connection in the game that allows for immediate communication while you're hunting. And it's not just about relying on other players, but also being able to get into the game by yourself and having voice tutorials that don't stop the action as you play." The monster Behemoth was added to Monster Hunter World due to a collaboration with Final Fantasy XIV. As it turns out, this is a collaboration almost a decade in the making, as producer and director of Final Fantasy XIV, Naoki Yoshida, is actually friends with Ryozo Sugimoto. Yoshida stated in an interview with VG247 regarding the rework of Final Fantasy XIV. When I made that announcement, Mr. Sugimoto was kind of angry, almost. He was worried about my career. He was asking, "Are you sure you want to move forward with this?" It was as if he was thinking about it as his own problem. He was so concerned and so caring for me about it. But at the same time, he understood that if I was serious about rebuilding Final Fantasy XIV, it was my decision. And so he offered. He asked if Capcom or Monster Hunter could do anything to help. And that's kind of the catalyst. The Final Fantasy XIV and Monster Hunter collab was planned before Monster Hunter World's game announcement. Naoki Yoshida was given the opportunity to have dinner with Konami Masami Fujioka about 3 years before the game's release, where they discussed the potential collaboration. While designing the behemoth in Monster Hunter World, Naoki Yoshida made sure to let the design team make the parts breakable like any other monster. This is to avoid any player backlash, as fighting a monster with unbreakable parts may seem like Final Fantasy XIV's team doesn't want the behemoth to take visible damage. Devil Joe is referred to as Pickle by the handler in-game, in reference to the popular fan name given to the Brute Wyvern. Other nicknames for monsters include the B-52 Bomber for Basilgoose, and my personal favorite, Dodogama, aka the Best Boy. Capcom's top 3 largest selling franchises are Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and Monster Hunter. While the first 2 games had worldwide appeal, Monster Hunter was only really popular in Japan until the release of Monster Hunter 4U, and especially gained worldwide notoriety after the release of Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter World became Capcom's highest selling game at 7.5 million units before the release of the PC version on August 9th of 2018. Back in 2014, there was a temporary attraction at Universal Studios Japan that featured animatronics of Monster Hunter monsters, most likely due to the series' massive popularity in Japan. Also, 2 years prior, there was another animatronic of a gold Rathian at Universal Japan. The Rotten Veil appears to be a giant corpse of a Dalamotter, a large elder dragon introduced in Monster Hunter 4. The top of the map appears to be the creature's skull, an area in the veil that looks like the creature's spine, and many of the zones are covered in effluvium, a gas that comes from dead elder dragons that eventually become crystal. The last monster the player has captured will be asleep on the platform in front of the main gate. Despite being at the top of the food chain in Wildspire Waste, Diablos and Black Diablos are actually herbivores. All Black Diablos are female Diablos in heat, making them not a true subspecies of monster like Azure Rathalos. According to Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, Kushala Daora can shed its skin when it becomes rusted. Kulve Taroth's design is based on the Greek mythos of the ram with a golden fleece. The winged golden ram was known as Colchis and was the holy ram of Zeus. Devil Joe's constant hunger is caused by a massive amount of body heat, speeding up the monster's metabolism and causing it to starve constantly. When Kirin appears in the Coral Highlands, a thunderstorm becomes visible in the sky. Early concept art of Anjanath shows him marking his territory. The Gyros and Great Gyros monsters have developed gills that allow them to breathe effluvium in the Rotten Veil and convert it into oxygen, like a fish in water. Odogaron's back will actually glow after it's eaten. Male Baroths have larger crowns on their head than female Baroths. Baroth uses mud as armor during combat, but outside of fighting, it uses it to stave off the heat in the Wild Wasteland. Anjanath is the only brute wyvern with feathers. Young Geratodus are said to eat by entering prey via a wound and eating them from the inside out. They also have spikes on their gills to prevent them from being pulled out. This may be based on the Kondaru, a parasitic catfish found in the Amazon, known for entering wounds and, other places. Basilgoose aren't seen until high rank because by the time the player has reached that point in the story, Zora Magdaros has upset and scattered them by reaching the Elder's Recess. Rathian and Rathalos compete with one another in the wild, the winner getting to live in the forest and the loser having to live out in the wastes. The Monster Hunter World Iceborne DLC is going to be adding a dynamic difficulty, meaning the difficulty will change as players join and leave, and will also be adding a 2 and 3 player difficulty rather than the current single or multiplayer difficulty. When a monster is poisoned, they are drained of their health based on their resistance to the effects, and each time the monster is afflicted, it requires more build-up damage of poison to trigger the poison status. The same applies to paralysis. Mounting is considered a status effect by the game, similar to paralysis and poison. As such, in order to trigger a mount, the player will have to deal a certain amount of altitude damage before a mount is triggered. It is possible to block or dodge roll through roars, preventing the player from being staggered briefly. This technique requires very precise timing, so you're better off getting equipment with the earplug skill. Though it's a satisfying tradition to watch the camera cut away to the flailing body of the monster you just defeated, the player may find it unnecessary and just wants to cut right in right away. All the player needs to do is press pause to cancel the cutaway camera. Poogie isn't entirely an aesthetic pet, but can actually help the player find hidden items. When successfully doing the petting minigame with Poogie over the course of a few quests, the pig will eventually jump in the air with excitement and allow you to pick them up. Carrying them around will occasionally cause the controller to vibrate in certain areas, and placing down your pig friend will cause them to dig around for a hidden item nearby. With the Witcher crossover event, Capcom wanted the mission to feel like a quest right out of The Witcher 3, and paid close attention to detail when combining the dialogue and combat for the quests. This crossover is also unique in that it's not a limited time quest and can be repeated. The name Xeno'jiva has both Greek, Hindu, and Jain origins. The word Xeno in Greek means alien, and Jiva in Hindu and Jain means a being with life force. This name comes from the fact that Xeno fell from the heavens as the Sapphire Star. Kirin has the most variations of any monster: low rank, high rank, tempered, and arc tempered. Using a bow with attack boost 4, critical eye 4, weakness exploit 3, critical boost 3, someone actually managed to defeat Nergigante in under a minute by repeatedly wall jumping and firing into the monster. According to the lore of Monster Hunter World, the first fleet was sent to the New World 40 years before the events of the game, with about 8 years between each of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fleets respectively. Some notable English voice actors in the game include Eden Regal as the handler, Jameson Price as the commander, Matt Mercer as the field team leader, and Xander Mobus as the 2nd Fleet Master. Since the very first Monster Hunter, players have sworn that there's an in-game mechanic known as the Desire Sensor. Basically, if there's a piece of armor or weapon the player is working towards, the game is less likely to give you the required material, making the player have to repeat fights in order to get the drops they need. This system is entirely speculation, and there's no evidence pointing towards this system existing within the game. But admittedly, it does feel like it when you've been grinding Azure Rathalos for 3 weeks.